Good evening. Good evening. I am Persis Drell. I'm the provost of Stanford University, and it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the 54th Carlos Kelly McClatchy Symposium. We are very fortunate to have Will McClatchy here tonight, and I'd like to thank him and Susan McClatchy for all the McClatchy family has done to support the study of journalism here at Stanford. And I want to thank all of you for joining us at what promises to be a very special event. In August 2019, the New York Times published the 1619 Project, a look at how slavery shaped and continues to influence the course of U.S. history. New York Times correspondent Nikole Hannah-Jones created the project, and writer Kiese Laymon contributed a short story to it. We're here tonight to celebrate and discuss their remarkable work. Examining the interweaving of history and civil rights has a long tradition at Stanford, stretching back to the 1960s when three great civil rights leaders gave talks at Stanford. Bob Moses of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1964, Eldridge Cleaver of the Black Panther Party in October 1968, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in April 1967. In his speech at Stanford titled "The Other America," Dr. King spoke movingly about the struggles of the Black community in the face of discrimination, poverty, and widespread unemployment. Woven through his speech were the issues of race, class, power, and privilege. Today, more than 50 years later, many areas of Stanford focus on the study of how race has shaped U.S. history, politics, culture, and national identity, including the sponsors and co-sponsors of tonight's event: the Department of Communication, African and African American Studies, the Department of History, the John S. Knight Journalism Fellowship, the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity, and American Studies. Just last month, Stanford's Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute partnered with the Riverside Church in New York City to release 6 audio recordings previously unknown to historians of Dr. King speaking between 1961 and 1967 at the church. Journalism is often said to be the first rough draft of history. The New York Times 1619 Project describes its goal this way. It aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of our national narrative. Tonight, we are so fortunate to hear from 2 people involved in that pursuit, and here to introduce them and lead tonight's discussion is Michael Bolden, the Managing Director of the John S. Knight Journalism Fellowships. Thank you.
Thank you, Persis, for setting the stage for our conversation tonight. 1619 isn't a year that most of us have thought about, but we live every day with its impact. Now, thanks to the New York Times and its 1619 Project, we're called to embrace a more honest assessment of history by acknowledging the impact of chattel slavery on our country and confronting its living legacy. As a member of the Stanford community, a journalist, and a native of the Deep South, I look forward to this discussion with our distinguished guests. We are all privileged to be in their company for this conversation. First, we have Nikole Hannah-Jones. Nikole is the award-winning investigative journalist who covers civil rights and racial injustice for the New York Times. She is the creator of the 1619 Project and the author of its opening essay. For her work on racial equity, the resegregation of America's schools, and failures of housing policy, she's won a host of honors, including Peabody, Polk, and John Chancellor Awards. And in 2017, she received a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship. She is the co-founder of the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, which is designed to increase the number of editors and reporters of color working in investigative journalism and to keep them in the profession. Please welcome Nikole.
Thank you.
Our next guest, Kiese Laymon, contributed to the 1619 Project and has written for numerous publications, including the New York Times, Paris Review, and more. Kiese is the Ottilie Schillig Professor of English and Creative Writing at the University of Mississippi. His work includes the novel Long Division and an essay collection, How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America. His autobiography, Heavy, an American Memoir, was named one of the best books of 2018 by numerous publications, and it won the Andrew Carnegie Medal, among other notable prizes. Heavy is an unabashed examination of race, family, violence, the South, and the weight of growing up Black in our country. Please welcome Kiese. Now, before we begin the conversation, I want to give you some information about the structure of our evening. The discussion will be divided into two parts. Kiese, Nikole, and I will have a conversation for approximately 45 minutes. We will then switch to questions from you. There are staff members circulating index cards in the audience. Please write your question on a card and pass it to the aisle. The staff will collect your questions and pass them to us when we get to the audience Q&A. We will try to get to many of your questions as possible, but time this evening will be limited, so I apologize in advance if we don't get to your card. Now let's get started. So, Nikole, let's start at the beginning. Your opening essay for the project begins, "Our founding ideals of liberty and equality were false when they were written. Black Americans fought to make them true. Without this struggle, America would have no democracy at all." You read that and you just sort of go, whew, you know. How did you sell this project with such an unflinching premise to your bosses at the Times?
So first of all, thank you for hosting us in this conversation, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. There's a lot of things you could be doing, so we really appreciate you spending this evening with us to talk about slavery. So that's probably the most common question I get, because the assumption is that it had to have been really hard to sell something this Black to the New York Times. But the truth is, it didn't actually take really any convincing at all. I pitched the project it was almost a year ago this month, and I went into a meeting. We have a weekly ideas meeting, and I told them my idea. I said, this is the 400th anniversary. This year will be the 400th anniversary of the first Africans being sold in slavery in Virginia. Have you guys ever heard of that date? No one had. And I said that I wanted to take over an entire issue of the magazine to assessing the modern legacy, that I basically wanted to show that you could look all across modern American life in all of these areas, and virtually nothing had been left untouched by that decision. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do that through very rigorous scholarship to make that case. My editor, the editor-in-chief of the magazine, Jake Silverstein, at that meeting said, okay, let's do it. And we did.
And so at what point did you go to the big bosses, to Dean Baquet and everyone, and say, we're going to do this?
So I never had that conversation with them.
Okay.
At some point in the process, I know Jake let them know that we were doing a big project, but the magazine operates really fairly independently from the newspaper. We're definitely allowed to have more voice than the newspaper. So I don't know at what point he let them in onto what we were doing, but I would say it was fairly late in the process that they really understood what we were doing.
But this is an idea that you had been sitting with for a while, at least this idea of 1619.
Yeah,
Right?
since high school. So I was bused into white school starting in second grade, and my high school was about 20% black, and it offered a one-semester Black Studies course. And when I took that course, it was transformative for me. I was already in high school, which is your period of radicalization anyway. But then, like taking that class, I just got really angry that this was the first time in my entire academic career that I had ever learned about any contributions that Black people had made.
This is in Waterloo, Iowa.
Yes, Waterloo, Iowa. And I just remember, I sometimes describe it as that moment in the Malcolm X movie when Malcolm is in the prison cell and Elijah Muhammad comes to him on a vision, and then he sees his world, right? For the first time, he really starts to understand the world, and that's what that class was for me. So I began to read Black American history obsessively, and every time, even when that class ended, I would go back to that teacher, who was the only Black male teacher I ever had, and I would ask him, give me another book. As soon as I finished a book, give me another book. And one of the books he put in my hand was Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett. And it was probably on page 29 or 30. I still have the book because I actually never returned it to him. But that's how that's okay. That kind of thievery, I think, is okay. It's theft of knowledge.
That's right.
That I saw the year 1619. And I can remember I was either 16 or 17 years old, and profoundly understanding that there was a reason no one had ever taught us that date, and being completely shocked that we had been on these lands that long, that we predated almost every European who had made us feel like we didn't belong in this country. And even as a teenager, that just stuck out to me, that date and the power of it and the power of that erasure. Because of course, every American child has learned about the Mayflower in 1620. None of us, even today, few of us were ever taught about the White Line in 1619, and there's a reason for that. So I've been thinking about 1619 since high school. I went to high school, a couple years ago. And it's been in my Twitter bio for a decade. Yeah. I always say I write about race in America from 1619, and this was actually the first opportunity I literally got to write about race in America from 1619.
That's awesome. And so Kiese, so your work, you're right out there talking about race and equity and history. How did you become involved in the project and end up contributing the short story that you did?
First of all, thank y'all for coming out. Thank you, Nikole, for asking me to be a part of this project and also coming out tonight. The story of how I got involved is very simple. Most of us in this room know who Nikole Hannah-Jones is. Yeah. And if she asks you to do something, you say yes. And what actually happened is that Nikole sent me a list of dates and asked me if I wanted to do a creative sort of short project connected to the dates. And I think I had to say, these are the 3 I would like to do. And then they came back and were like, this is what we want you to do. And when they came back with the Jesse Jackson's speech at the Democratic National Convention, I thought a lot about growing up in Mississippi with a young mother who was a political scientist. And I remember hearing that speech with her, and I remember just being enamored by the notion of a rainbow as a young person. And, as I got older and I went back and I thought a lot about that speech and how sadly radical that speech is compared to not even the people running for president now, but compared to a lot of the speeches that Obama gave. I just thought that we needed to talk. I wanted to write some sort of creative exploration into that speech. And at the time, my mother was very skeptical that the talk of rainbows would galvanize working class people in Mississippi. Super skeptical. but I was a young person who was like, but he talking about rainbows, mama, you know, right? And so because they did not ask me to write an essay, I wanted to write a short story that explored a young person's sort of like glee in listening to this Afro, big-eyed, beautiful man talk about something that child could relate to, which was rainbows, but also wanted to bring in the fact that around the same time that I listened to that speech, we had, I think, thankfully, we had the first, in Mississippi, like the first mass generation of Latinx folks coming in, and so to Mississippi to work in the chicken plants where my grandmother worked. So I just wanted to try to blend all of that into a very short piece and hope that it worked. And that's how I got involved.
And it works very well.
Can I ask a question? How many of you guys have seen the actual print magazine?
Dang.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's good.
That's good.
Well, I'm saying if you haven't seen it, then you may not understand like the role that Kiese and the other literary writers played, because we have like in the actual magazine, we call it a literary timeline, where we task some of the greatest American writers who are also Black with coming up with either original pieces of fiction or poetry along this timeline to tell this story. And the idea really came because we were talking one day about, at least for the first half of the time we were in this country, most Black people were not allowed to be literate. And so there isn't a written history of so many of these moments, at least not from the Black people who experienced them. And so how could we have the descendants of the enslaved reimagine these moments where if there is a record, it was only written by white people. Absolutely. And that's how we came to do it. And I was telling Kiese, he was literally one of the first writers that I knew. We both have roots in Mississippi, and he's just one of the great American writers, period, that I wanted to do it. And I was actually really happy when Jesse Jackson was one of the moments that you wanted to explore.
I was really happy too, and I just want to say shortly that one of the things I really appreciated about Nikole doing this is that she allowed us to play. Like I didn't just write a short story. I wrote like a young adult short story that not only talked about Jesse Jackson and his eyes and his afro and rainbows, but also talked about what I think is tangentially super important when thinking about Mississippi and Jesse Jackson, which is the Neshoba County State Fair, where Reagan came and put the roots of states' rights back into the conversation, and that root has not left our conversation yet. But again, if you're writing like a short YA piece, you can't say it the way I just said it. But I just was really thankful that you all allowed us space to play in a magazine that most people deemed like super serious. And I think all of our pieces were serious, but I think they were serious in a different way.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Your mention of Reagan actually brings up an interesting idea. So, one of the things we talk about with Reagan is the idea of America being a shining city on a hill, right? This identity that's become sort of ingrained in our consciousness. And in a very unflinching way, the 1619 Project says, okay, if you're a shining city on the hill, we're going to look at you and see all the flaws. How do you reconcile those things? Or you're exposing the mythology of it. Nikole, what do you think?
I mean, Black people have never had the luxury of believing that shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
so much of what this project is clearly being told from the perspective of those upon whose backs these foundations were built. Yeah. And that we did not, what was critical to me was that this was a project that was going to center slavery and center Black people. And, those are founding myths because they were myths. Right. And you can't claim 1776 in the Declaration and not acknowledge that Thomas Jefferson owned 130 human beings when he wrote those words, and that he knew even his own family members, whom he enslaved, would not enjoy those rights. Those myths serve a purpose, and it's this idea of exceptionalism, that we are a country that had a couple flaws. Yes, 10 of the first 12 presidents practiced human bondage, but that's beside the point, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we're taught about this history, but it wasn't beside the point. It was the point. It is what allowed this scrappy group of colonists to have the moxie and audacity to think that they could break off from the most powerful empire in the world because they were getting this tremendous amount of wealth and power from enslavement. So this is an attempt not to destroy, as some people said, America or the idea of America, but to argue that the true patriots were actually the Black folks who believed in the ideas that the founders did not when they wrote them. So yes, it is a beautiful thing to think of a shining light on the hill, but if you shine that spotlight down, you see a whole lot of terrible shit that went to building that. The extermination of the original people who lived here because they needed land, and then the enslavement of Black people because they needed labor. And that is also the foundation. We were founded on really majestic ideas.
Yeah.
Those ideas are beautiful. You know, the first opening lines of the Declaration are some of the most famous words in the English language. Like most of us in this room can probably recite them without even looking at the words. Mm-hmm. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. Of these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then we know that Black people wouldn't legally even have citizenship for an entire century after those words were being written. And then we wouldn't have full citizenship rights for 200 years after those words were written. And you can't just stuff that history down, and that's what we have done, because that's how we have dealt with that founding hypocrisy. But if we ever want to truly be the country of those ideas, we have to confront the foundation, the corrupt foundation upon which it was built.
So one of the things that's interesting in your opening essay is you talk about your father, and he served in the Army, and he flew the American flag, and that you never really understood why he would do that.
I did not.
But you've come to an understanding, I guess, in
About 9 months ago.
Yeah. So,
So yeah, I opened the essay talking about my dad flying what I just considered just this embarrassingly high flag in our front yard, and how, it was the first thing you saw if you came up to our house. And I didn't know a single other Black family who flew a flag in their yard. And I was deeply embarrassed by that. And I really just believed it was a sign of my dad's subordination. Like, why would you so flagrantly display what I considered an icon of oppression in a country that had never treated him as a man? And I didn't really get it, honestly, until I started reading for the essay that I was writing. I knew that I wanted to write about Black people's role in actually turning this country into the closest semblance we have of a democracy. But I had to do a lot of reading to make, form my argument. And it was as I'm reading this really illogical patriotism that Black people had. Right. There was no reason when Abraham Lincoln was like, I got some money for y'all to leave, we should have took that money and got the hell out of here. Right. This was a country that had enslaved us for 250 years. There was no reason for us to stay, and yet Black people were like, no, this is our ancestors' blood is in this soil. Their bones are buried under this dirt. We built this. And those beautiful words of universal equality, we believe that those can be made true. And that is the most beautifully patriotic thing I can imagine. And it so really wasn't until I was writing the essay that I was like, oh, my dad was claiming an inheritance that was rightfully his. Right. Whether this country believes that or not, he understood that. And there's a line in there that I say, which I'm sure I will use on my daughter 1,000 times when she's a teenager, which is that when you're young, you think you understand so much when really you understand so little, and that people who have actually lived through some things understand things that you can't as a child. And it took me to be 43 years old before I really understood, I'm not going to fly a flag. But I understood why he felt he had the right, as a man who served his country, as an American, as the original, as I argue in my essay, most Americans, because we are literally created within the confines of this country to fly that flag.
Yeah. So symbols like the flag and imagery are an important part of the 1619 project. Kiese, your story, I mean, you're talking about Jesse Jackson, and there's this element talking about the rainbows. Why did you feel it was important to include that? What were you trying to convey?
Well, I was trying to convey a number of things. One, in a small amount of space, I was trying to convey the wonder that Black children had with language and visual, right? So as the language of the rainbow, to me, would have been, in some ways like brittle and decrepit were it not presented to us by this afro-sheened Black man. Like, just some of y'all might be too young, but Jesse didn't just have an afro.
It was glistening.
It was glistening. Like this afro-sheened Black man with these beautiful big eyes and a tight suit was sitting in front of these people like talking, And I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, and Scott County, Mississippi with my grandmother, so I had to go listen to very bad, usually bad Black men preachers preach. But this Black man preacher was a preacher I wanted to listen to.
Yeah.
And so those of you who haven't listened to that speech, and Jesse Jackson's legacy has changed a lot since then, but the speech, I think, still has a kind of integrity to it that I think current politicians could actually learn something from. And so, again, I was enamored with the rainbow, enamored with the presenter of the rainbow, but I think much more importantly, what Jesse Jackson did, ironically, and I was 10 or 11 years old, was he made me think a lot about why I lived in Mississippi. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of us who come from the Deep South in my generation just took for granted that we grew up there, but I literally grew up there because my grandmother refused to think that migration was great. The Great Migration that was great for so many people and freed so many people in so many different ways. My granny was like, I worked this land since I was 5 years old. I ain't going nowhere. That's why I'm growing. That's why I come up in Mississippi, right? And so, as someone who does come from fertile land, filled with Black women who refused to run, not just my grandmama, but Mamie Till came back, Fannie Lou Hamer. I just thought it was important for me to try to tell a short story that was subtextually infused by all of these Black women who refused to run, and in the piece, the sister character is not buying the rainbow shit, right? Like she's just like, right, I hear you. It's rhetoric. It's wonderful, but this ain't the way. But the young boy is still like, but rainbows. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just thought in a short piece, I was just gonna try to show some conflicting stuff that ended in a kind of loving relationship where people agreed to disagree. But the root of that, to me, is like a generation of Black women who refuse to run, and that is not castigating the rest of my family who ran north at all. But my grandmama didn't.
Right.
Because she thought that land was hers, and she thought that land would one day be free. And that's why I'm here.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So the 1619 Project, it makes clear that the impact of slavery isn't just about one thing, right? It's about Wall Street and healthcare and disaster relief and medicine and education. And interesting to me as a former transportation editor, even subways and traffic jams. Talk to us about how slavery manifests in multiple interconnected ways today, and why that's an element of this project.
So this is, to me, the power of the project. Is at my pettiest, and I can get pretty petty. This project was the answer to every Black person who ever had the question asked, slavery was a long time ago, why don't you get over it? And this project was going to show that we can't get over it because it is everywhere. That you can look across. I mean, the way I envisioned it was if you don't read a single essay, just by flipping through the pages and seeing the titles of every piece, capitalism, democracy, sugar, traffic, healthcare, criminal justice, that just by flipping, you become overwhelmed with the sense that this really is operating invisibly in all these areas of American life that we have pretended that it hasn't. And then to also see that the harms of this foundation, the harms of this anti-Black racism, while they disproportionately hurt Black people, have never been contained just to Black people. It's not just Black people sitting in traffic in Atlanta, right? It's not just Black people dying of diabetes because we consume so much sugar. And certainly the piece on healthcare, where I wanted to explore why we have the stingiest social safety net of all Western industrialized countries. And linking that to slavery, and the polling is very clear on this. White American support for social programs declines as they believe that Black people, large numbers of Black people, are going to benefit from those programs. So we are willing to let millions of white Americans suffer and have no health care and die prematurely as long as more Black people are being hurt. So I really wanted to show this corrupting influence that slavery has had, and that we have tried to marginalize it, but the seeds are everywhere. And there were 10 essays. We could have done 20. You know, I'm convinced the reason we hate the post office is because the face of the post office is Black people. I'm gonna do that essay one day.
Do that.
Right? And so that argument, but really using intensive historiography, I didn't want it to just commemorate the past, because this idea that this was a long time ago, you know, in my essay towards the end, I say that I'm 43 years old, and at 43 years old, we are part, all of us, of the first generation of Black people since 1619 who had full rights of citizenship when we were born. Our parents did not. This is not ancient history. So that was, to me, really the critical argument that we were trying to make. And the two pieces that really pissed people off were democracy and capitalism. Because these are what we consider, right, the two exceptional elements of America, is that we are the freest, most liberatory country in the world, and that capitalism is the greatest economic system ever created. But a capitalism that was built literally on saying it is okay to torture and work people to death as long as you can turn a profit, by virtue can't be a great system. And a democracy that deprives most citizens of the right to exercise that democracy, and it wasn't just Black folks, it was women, it was Native people, and actually poor white people at the time of the Constitution, means we were born into a paradox. And the way that we still punish Black people is because every time you see a Black person, you're reminded of that lie. We only exist here because of that lie. And that's why we still have to be segregated, separated, marginalized, made to believe that our circumstances are our own fault, when it is not accidental that the two groups in this country who are at the bottom of every indicator of well-being are the two groups that didn't choose to be here, which are Native Americans and Black folks. That's not accidental, and this project was trying to show the intentionality and the predictability of everything we see today.
So, I mean, you're talking about stuff, and the project talks about stuff that, you know, if you grew up in a Black household, we've always talked about this sort of stuff, right? So to some extent, you're talking about things that we're talking, oh, don't take that out in public. And can I say this is true, you know, with your book as well?
Your book is definitely stuff you don't take in public.
I mean, so so do you engender criticism for doing that because you're taking stuff out into public that we were kind of taught, no, you keep that at home? And two, the fact of doing that, I mean, I guess you just felt it had to be done.
Yeah, I have not, no. Black folks have responded by saying, we knew some of this, but we didn't have the facts back it up, like things that we believed in, that we felt, which we've been made to believe we're just believing in conspiracies, right? That now it's like, oh, I actually have the history and the research to back up that thing which I have always felt. Or, you know, the response from Black folks has been a great sense of empowerment, that we've been told that all of these things are our fault. We have been told that we simply are in the conditions we're in because we choose it. and that we should get over something that this country can't clearly get over. And so to have the actual evidence laid out and to be able to engage that evidence, there's a reason we don't learn 1619. There's a reason we don't learn most of this history. There's a reason people were absolutely shocked and appalled that our founders, some of them, wanted to break off from Britain to preserve slavery. If you study history, you should not be that shocked and appalled by that, right? But we are taught certain things, and we are not taught certain things. And to be able to have validation of your experience has been very empowering to Black folks. So I haven't had folks who are like, why are you, because there's nothing in the project that I think is sharing our personal dirt. I think this project is humanizing and legitimizing our struggle and our place in this country that we built, but that we've been told we don't really have a right to claim.
Yeah, very important.
And I would argue that though those pieces are written by, absolute geniuses who are writing directly, I think, to us, I still think what's interesting to me about that project is that there's still what Ellison calls lower frequencies. When you don't control the means of production, you often have to rely on lower frequencies, right? And so when I read and reread 1619, it doesn't read to me like a piece of information that is just being guided into some people's minds. So some people might take it that way. I still read it as a very textured, combustible piece of art that you can grab and feel little hidden transcripts, if you will. But I think that's important for this thing because I think often that 1619 is talked about as if it's like a pure historical document that people are just going to consume, right? And that might be true. But what I've noticed is that there's things that I thought I consumed and I actually went back and read them and I was like, oh, I didn't eat all of that shit at all, right? There's a whole lot more going on in that. So I would just encourage those of you who think you have read the 1619 Project to reread, particularly Black folk in this room, and look for those hidden transcripts and look for those lower frequencies because they are there. They are there.
Absolutely. And a big... I was determined this was going to be unflinching.
Yes.
That I know the platform that I'm in,
right.
But I didn't care, right? It was going to be unflinching in the language, in the brutality. I don't write in high language. I don't think that's necessary. I'm from Waterloo, and I try to write for my people. So all of those things were things that I was thinking about the entire time. That if we were going to do this, we were not going to worry about people's feelings. We were not going to worry about trying to make it palatable. We were just going to tell what we consider to be the truth in the way that we felt it needed to be told.
Right. And can I say, and I knew that was true in the editorial process when I turned in a draft of the thing y'all asked me to write, and there was a line in there about Reagan and the Neshoba County Fair and how in his speech, one of the things that Reagan did, or I thought, or the character thought, was he presented white folk with a buffet of Black American suffering, but the problem was that they have an insatiable appetite for it. They can eat that shit forever, right? It's like Ryan's, Golden Corral, all the buffet places y'all got around here. They never get tired of eating our suffering. And as a writer, I put shit in my drafts often that I think, I'm gonna make you take that out.
Right, they're not gonna leave that in there.
When it came back, I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's still in there.
We're doing something a little different here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
So what is it like to, so you started working on this a year ago, right? And since it was published in August, you've been touring and talking and immersed in it. And there is a lot of violence and brutality and trauma that comes with all of this, right? And to be immersed in it for that long, what is that like? And how do you take care of yourself being immersed in that?
It's going to sound like a flip answer, but it's really not. I eat too much and drink too much. This was the hardest thing I've ever done. Okay. And you said it exactly right, to spend 8 months immersed in the most horrible things that have been done to your folks. And I was writing the opening essay, but I also was overseeing every aspect of the project. So I read everything, saw every image, like just everything in the project I had to see, I had to go through, and it was intense. I cried multiple times. I don't know a Black person who worked on the project who didn't cry at some point. Most of the white people who worked on the project cried at some point. It was hard, and it's not like at 6 o'clock when I go home, I just leave that at work. Like, I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm waking up thinking about it. I'm waking up writing, I have a notepad on my nightstand.
You can't escape it on social because
Right.
you're immersed in it.
There's no escaping it. There just isn't, and it was really hard. And it's still hard because I'm talking about it all the time. We're expanding it into the book, so I'm still thinking about it. But it also is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. And when I go out and I talk to people and people tell me what the project has meant to them, then I feel like I get filled back up. And then, I go to the bar after the speech and then, but no, people always ask about self-care. I don't really know how to do that. I just work. And it's not probably the healthiest thing to do, but I don't actually know how to really deal with this always being in my head.
Yeah.
And your labor, the labor you put into that project, I know I'm speaking for a number of other people, but I'll only speak for myself. When I read the project, I was still on book tour. And, it's hard to be that person who complains about being on book tour, but, hey, hotels and like random white people touching you in places you don't want to be touched, that shit gets a little old sometimes, right? So I came home and plus I live alone, I live in Mississippi. I was very depressed. Like I was sad, I was alone. My book had done really well. I was afraid of what it meant for my family because I talked about my mom, my grandmama, and I thought I was in need of like something liberatory. But what I was really in need of was something liberatory and soothing that made me want to go to sleep and made me want to wake up. And the 1619 Project, in addition to being something I think changed the way we will think about America from here on out, selfishly helped me want to go to sleep and helped me want to wake up at a time when I did not want to wake up or go to sleep. So I just think it's important that we talk about these sort of like artistic, journalistic interventions as not just things that like change the minds of white folk, but they also help Black people want to live, which is much more than like liberatory. It's much more than soothing. It literally is a word that I don't think we have a name for yet. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
So a reminder that we will be taking questions from the audience. If you will raise your card, pass them to the end of the aisle, the people will start collecting those. This is such an important work, but one of the things that's happened is that it's encountered its share of critics, including Newt Gingrich, who called it propaganda.
That's a compliment. I mean, that's how you know you did it right. Yeah.
Others make the claim that it increases racial division, and a group even launched the 1620 Project as a countermeasure. How do you respond to the assertions that the Times is rewriting history or leaving out context or being racist by talking about race?
Just go on my Twitter.
That's the answer.
I mean, one does not make the arguments that we were making that we should consider 1619 our true founding, not 1776, that Black people are the perfecters of democracy, that we are the most American of all Americans, that slavery is central to every aspect of American life, and not expect you're gonna get some pushback, right? And to make that argument in the New York Times means something in ways both good and bad for a lot of people. So I completely expected that there were going to be people who wanted to push back on that. And we people try to accuse us of rewriting history. We literally said that's what we were doing. Right? Like, the very first page of the magazine is like, we are reframing the way that we see our country and the role of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans. What people don't seem to understand is we have never been taught an objective history. Objective history does not exist,
Right.
period. And people who argued about context or I wasn't good enough to the good white people, we have heard those stories. We don't need a re-education on that story. We have heard those stories. This was producing a counter-narrative from the bottom for those who have never had our rightful place in the American story. So that pushback was expected. Mostly, I mean, like you said, Newt Gingrich, I was like, that was the greatest honor I ever received.
Well, and I saw.
But some of the historians, like some of that criticism did bother me. I'll be honest, I'm a human being. We were very, very careful with consulting with historians. Historians wrote for the project. Historians fact-checked the project because we also understood you cannot make these arguments and not get your facts right.
Right.
That people would be wanting to discredit the project, that they would be looking to discredit the project. So some of the criticism that was clearly not in good faith, and efforts to discredit the entire project, and also like I carry an additional weight. I'm a Black woman who put this project into the world, and if the project is successful, that opens doors for other Black and brown people who want to pitch something ambitious. Yeah. If this project fails, I make it harder for the next person who comes behind me. So all of that was the weight I was carrying, and some of that was really disheartening. I'll say the oddest, most unexpected thing was when Trump's lawyer mentioned it during the impeachment trial. Y'all ever heard that? Now, I definitely never saw that shit coming.
I didn't even.
That was crazy.
I was like, I mean.
Look, I was like, I made it. I have made it. I am in the official congressional record of Donald Trump's impeachment.
That's it.
Lord knows. Anyway, so.
Well, and to its credit, the New York Times has not just been supportive of the project and everything. I mean, they've proclaimed this is a marquee thing. There was a Super Bowl ad, an ad during the Academy Awards featuring Janelle Monáe just Sunday. I mean, and that's just like saying, no, look at this. This is important.
Yeah, the New York Times gets a lot of criticism, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. But what I will say is there was nothing that I asked for on this project that they said no. I was not restrained in any way. Okay. This was literally the biggest project the Times has ever done. The Times has never done an entire issue dedicated to one thing, plus a special broadsheet of the newspaper, plus a podcast, plus a live event series. It has never happened. And when the critics started coming, they didn't kind of shrink and pull back, but very publicly voiced support of the project, and then had the audacity, to run an ad during the Oscars as part of our Truth campaign. So while we do get a lot of criticism, and a lot of it is justified, it also is a place where a Black woman who looks like me, who talks like me, and who pitched a project like this could put out literally the blackest thing the Times has ever done, and it wasn't something that they tried to hide or marginalize, but that they have really treated as central to the work we do.
So we three are sitting up here, all with Southern roots. By any measure, people would say there are three successes. Yet we operate within institutions that are largely controlled by white people. So how does someone at the University of Mississippi, you've done it at the New York Times, but it's still a struggle, and someone at Stanford, how do we navigate the intricacies of those power structures and be effective in a way that helps tell history in the way that it needs to be told?
I mean, I was taught by people who love me deeply that you have to be excellent before you can be liberatory. I think that's bullshit, right? I think I don't know what kind of excellence you can be if there's not a liberatory element in it. And so for me, one, I was lucky to have my grandmother. She's just really good at loving people. I was lucky to have her. And then two, I was lucky to have a mother that taught me to revise everything, which means I didn't believe anything grown people taught me. So when grown people said, you gotta go to school and you gotta follow directions and you can talk about Malcolm X and Before the Mayflower and Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells, like after you get the A's. As a young person, I was like, I don't want the A's if I can't talk about that shit, right? And as a grown person who paid the price of being that young person, I just still think that every piece of art I go into, I don't go into that piece of art wanting to prove. I go into that piece of art wanting to discover. And then I want to perform that discovery for people coming after me, and I want to perform that discovery for the people who made me possible. But I want to push both groups of people. And I think the hardest part is pushing the older folks who made us possible. It's hard for me to push back against my grandmom and say, I understand why you change your voice every time you talk to white people, except when they're at your house. But grandmama, I don't really want to do that. And I don't think since you did that, I don't have to. So for me, it's just like, I just believe that excellence and a liberatory politic have to go hand in hand. And you have to prepare yourself for the punishment that invariably will come. And it's easier to protect yourself if you have squad, if you have loving people around you. And that's all I got. That's all I got. Yeah.
So that's so funny because I talk about this all the time when I talk to college students who want to know how do you exist in the space you are, being who you are. And what I always say, I say the only thing you can control is your excellence.
Right.
You can't control how anybody's going to see you, how anybody's going to treat you, what opportunities they're going to allow you, but you can control how excellent you are. Now, being excellent may not open doors for you.
Right.
And I think we should always interrogate, why do we want to be in these elite spaces in the first place? What is our purpose? And it's not saying we shouldn't be. Right. We are here. We absolutely should be here, but why? Do we want to be in these elite spaces because we think it somehow sets us above the rest of our folks?
Right.
Do we want to be the only one? Yeah. Or do we want to be in these elite spaces so that we can use the master's tools to destroy the master's house, right? That's the choice that you have to make. Why are we here? I'm here to subvert, right? That's why I'm here. I'm here to be in a place like the New York Times and produce the 1619 Project. So it's all of those things. It is, I only can be where I am by being excellent. Right. Because as we know, it is an unfair thing that our ancestors and our parents taught us, that we have to be twice as good. Ooh. But it is a true thing as well. And you can be twice as good and you still might not make it. Yeah. So I refused to compromise certain things. I was not going to conform. I wasn't going to pretend I didn't want to write the type of things I wanted to write. I wasn't going to wear their uniform that they expect you to wear to be in their spaces. And because of that, I was punished early in my career. I was nearly ran out of journalism. Right. And I had to make the decision as to whether I would compromise myself, my values for success, or would I remain true to who I am and maybe not get there? Absolutely. And I almost didn't get here because of that. So to me, we always have to be asking why are we in these spaces? And whose work are we fulfilling? Right. In being in these spaces.
And you know the ill thing about this, and I'm talking to you like we in private, but you know, my grandmama and them always said, my mother too, you have to be twice as excellent as white people. But again, I grew up in Jackson. When I finally went to school with white folks, we were like, I write about this in the book, we were 8th grade, we were flipping our eyelids in 2nd grade, right? These 8th grade white boys flipping their eyelids and shit, I'm like, I've been twice as good as You want me to be twice as good as, I say it every time. You want me to be twice as good as someone who's kind in a way, but mediocre, that's gonna make me twice as good as mediocre, which makes me a little less than mediocre. And so what I have been trying to teach my students who actually will look at journalism and look at someone, this is not a diss, really, look at someone like Jonathan Chait and be like, how do I look as a teacher being like, you gotta be twice as good as Jonathan Chait? When Nikole Hannah-Jones exists. You better try to be twice as good as Nikole Hannah-Jones. And I think this is the thing I think my grandmama didn't teach me. The consequence for being twice as good is hell often. So do not fool yourself into believing that excellence is not only gonna shield you, that excellence also often makes you a target. And so the question is, how do we collectively, lovingly, prepare ourselves for that target if we are lucky enough to be twice as excellent?
Yes.
That's what I think.
So Ta-Nehisi always says, right, that freedom is the ability to be mediocre, right? Like that's freedom, that we don't have to be exceptional.
Right.
That's not freedom.
Right.
Because white people don't have to be exceptional. I talked about this, how the one thing that busing did for me, being bused into white schools did for me outside of the education I got, was it disabused me of the notion from a young age that white people were smarter than us or better than us. And it's not saying white people aren't smart,
right.
But we are taught that they are smarter and better than us. Right. And what I realized by having intimate educational contact from a young age is that they just had a hell of a lot more resources than we had, and that was it. Yeah. And that if you gave me access to their teachers and their books and their classroom, I could outperform all of them. Right. And that's really what it is about. We should be excellent because we want to be excellent.
Absolutely.
But we shouldn't be excellent because we think that will somehow indemnify us against racism, that we will become worthy of the respect of people whom we don't have to be fighting for their respect. And I agree with that 100%.
100%.
Phew.
I know it's going to get deep like that. I'm sweating.
Actually, I'm here for it, and I was hoping. So, let's talk about allies. People who say that they're allies of.
You trying to get us fired?
Trying to get him fired.
Hey,
right?
Hey, this is my house. I might be the first one to go.
That's what I'm saying.
But people who say they're allies of black people and who are in the fight with them, what is the takeaway for them for the 1619 Project? What is your response to that sort of assertion? That this isn't necessarily for me, I'm in your corner.
Oh, God, I don't even know how to answer that.
That happened?
That mostly happens with my school segregation writing, actually. And I have an easier answer than I have for this. I think that this is what I'll say. You cannot come away, if you actually read the 1619 Project from front to back, you cannot come away without understanding that a massive debt is owed. That it's not simply okay to say, oh, I'm sorry, that was bad. There has to be a redistribution of resources.
But you're talking reparations.
I'm talking reparations. I'm talking about we actually have to have a massive infusion of resources into communities that have been economically deprived, into schools where black children have generationally suffered from the theft of their education, real enforcement of our civil rights laws. But it can't just be that you feel badly about something. We don't need your feelings. Black people need, right? Yeah. Black people need repair. And repair has to be both financial, and it has to also be the way that we are seen in this country. At the end of my essay, I argue that, for 400 years, we have been treated as a problem. If you guys Google the Negro problem, black problem, if you Google it, you will find an unending number of pages. I did it, and I had just stopped clicking because I was like, I'm on page 12. Yeah. We have been studied for 2.5 centuries. We have been treated as a constant problem, as the source of national disunity, as a source of all that is wrong. And it is time that we stop being treated as a problem for a circumstance that we did not create. And that takes more than just empathy. That takes an action. And that takes an understanding that the project is not asking any white person to feel guilty about something that you did not do. You did not personally enslave someone. You don't have to feel guilty for slavery, but you have to acknowledge that you are a beneficiary of that system. And you can feel guilty for all the advantages that you take now that you shouldn't be. And that requires an actual action outside of just empathy. How many people have had a gut reaction to the idea of reparations that you just, in your gut, feel like that's wrong? You need to really question why that is. Why you automatically feel that people who were forced to in bondage for 250 years, who lived through legal segregation for 100 years, that somehow a 10-to-1 wealth gap, twice the unemployment rate, you measure it. There's only one thing that white people suffer from worse than black people. I've searched. It's osteoporosis. That's it.
Really?
No, for real.
For real?
I don't know why, but that's it. I guess, you know, all the years of slavery, our backs are straight. They're strong.
All that,
right?
that jogging.
So you can't look around today and see that we are literally on the bottom of everything. They say that if you hold white wealth constant, so white people don't earn any more wealth, it would still take 246 years for black people to get the same, to catch up with white wealth.
Right.
We were enslaved for 250 years. It's literally almost 1-to-1. Right. And then to say, you're owed nothing. That's immoral.
Right.
So you have to be willing to say that it is time, finally, after 400 years, to try to actually address that wrong. And it's not just about feeling badly. It's about doing something different to create the society that we want to believe that we are.
Absolutely.
And I'm just going to add this one last thing. What people need to understand, and this is why the universal health care piece is so important, right? Is if we could ever purge ourselves of this sin, of this lie, everyone's lives in this country would be better.
That's the thing.
It wouldn't just help us.
Right.
It is not good for a country to have such large segments of your population in poverty, unable to get a quality education, unemployed, unhealthy. We think we can contain those harms, but we cannot. And everyone is suffering. There are white people who are suffering right now because we can't get over racism. So if we would just understand that we actually are, literally our fates truly are tied together, even though we don't think that they are, that this would help our whole country, that we, as much as our founders were hypocrites, their ideas were right, and their ideas were just, but we can't get there if we don't make right what was done for all of us. And now, I'll let you move on, sorry.
That's it. That's it.
I'm ready to sit with it all day. So this is an interesting question. What influence, if any, did James Baldwin have on your thinking and perspective?
For
James
both of us?
Baldwin?
Yeah, James Baldwin, either one of you.
Oh, man. I'll be brief because that question deserves a super long answer. Baldwin, next to Tony K. Bombara, Baldwin was the first writer who I wanted to read the way I listened to music. And so for a lot of people in this, well, a few people in this room, not a lot, a few people in this room remember these things called tapes. Right? And if you had this thing called tapes, there's this thing called play, and there's this thing called pause, and then there's this thing called rewind. And so for a lot of music that I ended up loving in the mid-'80s, I would just record, play, rewind, because I just wanted to understand what they were saying, how they were doing it. And my mom taught me a lot about revision, but she didn't teach me I didn't hear her when she tried to teach me about rereading. And Baldwin, partially because his sentences are so rigorous, there's so much, literally you have a sentence sometimes that can go on a page. he'll have paragraphs that will go on 3 pages early in his career before mass media sort of dictated that people write differently. And so for me, Bolden was the first writer that I wanted to reread to understand, but also for pleasure. You know what I'm saying? I got lost in the pleasure of reading James Baldwin, and then I got lost in the pleasure of knowing that like there was space to critique Baldwin. And I think that if Baldwin were alive, he would have appreciated my critique. And so he's the first writer that I felt that about. And he also is the first writer who taught me to go beyond like the vaporous understandings I had of like love. Like Baldwin's idea of love is often like a very like what he calls mature, messy, nasty, funky, stank love. And that was the kind of love that I grew up with. So I owe Baldwin so much more than that, but for me, he was the first writer that told me that like I haven't read anything unless I've reread shit a number of times, and I definitely haven't written anything unless I've rewritten it a number of times. And I think his belief ultimately in white people early in his career, which I think he revised as he got closer to death, said a lot to me. And a lot that probably is ultimately sad that I think the 1619 Project responds to. But so that's what Baldwin means to me. Yeah.
Here's an opportunity for us to talk about a different element of the project. The New York Times recently published an article comparing textbooks in Texas and California public schools, highlighting how the Texas versions continue to delegitimize the legacy of slavery and Black Americans. How can we change the public narrative in America if schools are actively telling a story so different from 1619?
I think most people don't have an idea how political, particularly history textbooks are. And who gets to determine what's in those textbooks, how it's written, how textbooks are purchased. So in some ways, this is a place where citizens have to get more actively engaged in the process. But also, I think what I am most proud of in terms of the 1619 Project is that it was also released as a free curriculum. And we know this is part of the pushback from those historians was learning that it is being taught now in every state in the country. And that in, it's kind of awesome, that's true. A large number, so every high school in Chicago, DC, Newark, Buffalo, Red Cloud, Delaware, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina are all teaching the project as mandatory curriculum, and there's some 3,500 schools across the country that are teaching it. So it's not replacing curriculum, but it is supplementing it. And what I hope it does is just leads kids to question. I'm not even saying read this as the truth, as the one and only truth. This is an origin story. There are many. There could certainly be a similar project about Native people, right? But it's simply about opening the mind for a child who was taught history this way. And now you have a counter narrative to that I hope will lead kids to question all of the things that they're being taught. And that's really the beauty and the power. I've thought a lot about what it would have meant for me as a child to have taught a curriculum that didn't demean me, that didn't make me feel worthless in the context of America, and how empowering that would have been. And that's really the answer that the 1619 Project is providing in schools. And I can tell you, I've been going to a lot of high schools. And for Black kids especially, my essay on democracy and the role that Black kids have played has been so empowering for those kids because they've never, ever been taught that this was a land that we can claim and the role that we have been playing. We're taught that we're a problem, and I'm arguing that we're actually the solution.
Well, so you said Black children are born into a sense of shame.
Yes.
So how do we help our children, Black children, exist and thrive in this world?
I mean, honestly, we can't depend on our schools to teach our children to have a sense of their history and a sense of pride, because most of them are not going to do that. My daughter had her first Howard T-shirt and her first book on slavery when she was 3 years old. And I think every Black parent has this balancing act. If you want to protect your child's innocence for as long as possible, but you also want to prepare your child for the world before the world comes down on your child. So I don't think we can leave it up to educators or schools to give our children a strong sense of themselves and a sense of pride and empowerment. But we have to know that history to teach that history. Right. And so many of us don't even know it well enough, and we feel shamed. If you feel shame, you pass a sense of shame on to your children. Absolutely. If you think that there is something shameful about our ancestry starting with slavery, that is not shameful. We did not do that, and we don't have to feel ashamed of that, but that's what we are taught. And that's why we try to claim the continent of Africa as if the only pride we can have is somewhere else and not with our own ancestry here. So we have to come to terms with that so that we can teach our children to go into the world. And hopefully, the 1619 Project is going to be a series of books from elementary school up to adult. The curriculum is free. We're actually working on a K-8 curriculum right now as well, that we don't have to reteach our children as adults, that they can learn this history that empowers them from the beginning, and that white children and Latino children can also learn to stop seeing Black people the way that they've been taught to see them.
So a lot of people want to know, will there be season 2 of the podcast? That's an easy one, I guess.
No.
Okay, and an easy one.
Let them know.
Oh, goodness.
Not even a maybe.
Not even a maybe.
They got all they can get out of me on that.
So did the project change you in any way? Did it change your mind about anything? Was there some growth that you had that was revelatory?
I mean, I learned a lot, clearly. Every piece, even though I assigned the piece, I learned so much from the reporting and the writing that went into the pieces. But I think the most revelatory thing is I didn't realize I was patriotic.
Wow.
I never in my life have considered myself a patriotic person. And working on this project just made me realize that this is our birthright. Right. And we do not have a right to allow them to make us feel that we cannot claim the country of our birth and the country that we built. So that's the thing that I learned, is that it is not that flag pin wearing, blind patriotism. It is a patriotism that says, this is just what I argue in the essay, that those founding ideas were pure, and that we're gonna work to make them true, and no one has a right to make us feel that this isn't our country, because it is.
Yeah. So some of our faculty in the room want to know, what message do you have for them? So the people who are actually teaching some of the brightest people in the land who are going to be building this country, what message do you have for the faculty?
Come up with a better question. No, let me stop. Just playing, whoever asked that, just playing. Look, they're gonna have some new essays against the project published tomorrow. So this is one thing about me. I try to stay in my lane. I don't try to advise people who are professionals at what they do on how to do their jobs better. That's not my role. I appreciate, all of the faculty who are teaching the project and engaging with the project, and you all best know how to incorporate this work into your syllabi and whatever you're teaching. So the only thing that I would hope that you would do is spend more time teaching your students to question who gets to tell the stories, who has the power in these situations, and what is the actual true narrative. Right. Because that's really what this project is doing, is trying to unsettle what we think has been settled, and understand who has borne the consequence of these narratives. And it has been us. And institutions like this can be so disempowering if you are a non-white student. And you can feel very isolated and alone. And so I think you should always be thinking about that as you're teaching, is what is this experience? What is the lived experience of your students who really suffer in many ways to be at elite institutions like this?
Right. And I would never tell faculty what to do
You're a faculty though.
unless they ask.
Oh, well, so they asked. Several of
They
them asked.
did. So, I mean, I'm saying to this imaginary mass of faculty, what I say to myself is like, I think I just wonder what would happen across the country if we made like soulful intellectual innovation like what we want to see most in our students. And I think to get to soulful intellectual innovation, we have to go through the traditional steps of imitation and then like a interrogation of what we're imitating. But I think a soulful like intellectual sort of innovation necessitates that we ask our students to see their audience beyond us. I don't know how well we're educating our best and brightest if we tell them that we are the audience to whom we're writing, especially if what I heard is true about the lack of quote unquote diversity at this institution, right? So I think it's hard because oftentimes we are the ones grading and everything like that, but you know, if Stanford is like University of Mississippi, if you can find millions and millions of dollars to pay an athletic coach, you can find faculty who are willing to think beyond themselves as the audience for their students. And I just think that's super and crucial, not just for like students of color, but white students. I think most of us went to school, and whether we admit it or not, we were taught to write to and through a particular kind of white normative gaze. I do not think any sort of innovation, liberation, care, love, anything can happen if you maintain that. So, creatively, how do you get your students to write and lab and create beyond you is what I would ask myself and ask other faculty to consider since they asked.
Or there might have been people trying to get faculty in trouble too. So.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. I thought that was a faculty question. It was a student question, probably, wasn't it?
Problem.
My bad.
Just having a little fun.
My bad.
So several people also want to know, so how do you follow this? And I mean, this question is for both of you. How do you follow Heavy? What's next? What other ideas do you have for projects that you want to pursue?
My career is over. This is it.
It's a wrap.
That's I got, man. I gotta retire the jersey.
You could retire the jersey. Get a number. Get another one. I'm just writing stuff. I'm working on a new novel. I'm working on a new novel. Why you laughing? I really am. I'm just saying. I would like to talk about myself, but I'm working on a new novel. Working on another new book, and working on some other kind of projects that I'm really afraid of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kiese, in a response to your memoir, Heavy, your mother wrote an essay to you that contains these words, which I think seems appropriate to the 1619 project in some ways as well. But she wrote, "Your hope is that this remembrance will mobilize me, our family, and the nation to reckon honestly with the past." Can we ever do that collectively?
I mean, I have to believe yes. If that's a yes or no question, can we reckon with the past collectively? Yes, but I don't think collectively it means like monolithically, right? I don't think we all can reckon in the same way. But I absolutely have to believe it, right? Like my grandma, I don't think my grandmama lived the life she lived and died the life she's gonna die for me to say no, right? I think yes. But, and maybe Nikole want to get on that but, I don't know. I want to say yes. What do you think?
You know I'm not an optimistic person.
Nah, me either.
Can and will are two different things. That's what
Right.
I say. Can we? Absolutely. We are human beings with the capacity to do whatever it is that we value and think is worth the time and the effort and the pain.
Right.
Will we? No, I don't think so. I don't think we, as a society, want to do what is required. I think mostly people who have power are fine with the way things are.
And the hard part of that is that, you know, I think one of the important, I think intersectionality is misused more than any other word in the world. I think intersectionality is not diversity, but the hard part about that is that, like, I think there's a sliver of every person in this room and outside of this room that is invested in a kind of humiliation and domination of another group of people, right? And so the will is hard to say yes to, because what I think it means to divest yourself of the desire to humiliate and dominate is, like, we have to have a necessary quake and look at those parts of us that necessarily like crave humiliation, crave domination, and we like to call that craving courage. So it's gonna take like so much, which is why I don't think we will, but I know we will try. Do you believe that?
No.
Well, so the natural follow-up to that, if you don't believe it, why continue the work? I mean, because this has been your life's work. This isn't just about the 1619 Project. This is about the work you've done at ProPublica and other places as well.
I do the work because I want us to know that we make a choice. So it's not that I believe that my work is going to profoundly alter this country and the suffering of not just my people, but a lot of people. But I'm not going to let us sit comfortably and pretend ignorance and pretend that we don't know that we choose to sustain these systems and that we choose to do things that are harmful. So that's what motivates me, is a determination that I'm not going to let us look away from what we choose.
Okay. Wow.
I like that.
Yes, did you have a thought you wanted to add? Seemed like you were.
No, I was doing that thing where I'm trying to look on the bright side, you know.
We need that, though.
But I'm not like that, really. You know, I was like, they might need to hear that shit, but I think the we in that question is important, and we might not have time to unpack that we, but
Yeah, it's true too.
you know, so
Well,
that's all I say.
I was saying, let's unpack the we. Let's go there a little bit. Yeah, do we want to hear him unpack the we?
You brought it up. Now you got to do it.
Let's go, brother.
Okay, I'm not gonna talk longer than 10, 15 seconds. Like, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. I grew up in Mississippi. My grandmother grew up 1928. She's 90 years old. She lived to be 90 years old because a collected group of mostly black Southerners fought and loved and quaked. And so I think that there are segments of we who have taken this task to heart and made it so some groups of people have more access to healthy choice, second chances, and love. I don't think that's enough, but I want to honor the folks that enabled my grandmama, who grew up all through Jim Crow, to live to 90 years old. And so if I say that there's some sections of we that cannot or have not, I feel like I'm being disrespectful, not to her, but to the people that made her. But like, I think that sliver of we is a very small sliver of we. But so I do think there are some we's, some us's out there that can change this. I've seen it. Like, I've seen it, but what I've mostly seen is like most of us don't give a fuck enough. That's it.
So the challenge is, well, Nikole?
Well, okay, now I'm gonna add a little something. I'll add a little bit to that. Because it made me think about when I give my more formal talks on the 1619 Project, I always end with 2 slides. And one is a slide of the exit polls during the 2016 election, in which we were told that Trump supporters supported him because of economic anxiety, and yet 90% of black people voted against Trump, and no one in this country is more economically anxious than black folks, right? Double the unemployment rate in the best of times, lowest wealth, lowest social mobility, and then if you break those numbers out by gender, you know, black men can sometimes be problematic. So it was, you know, in the 80s for black men, but it was 98% of black women. And there's an asterisk on the chart because that 2% is within the margin of error. Right. So
that's right. And that might be
diamond and silk.
Might be diamond and silk.
Diamond and silk. That's it.
Might be diamond and silk, child.
Right.
Right.
And then the last slide I show is it's a picture of a black woman at the Women's March, and she's holding a sign that says "Trust Black Women." And what we know is there is a we. And that when you look at black people as a whole, black people are the most likely to support the common good. Right. Highest support for universal health care, highest support for a livable wage, highest opposition to death penalty. Black people tend to vote for community over the individual, and black women at the highest rates of all groups vote for what is best for community over ourselves. And that comes from a particular experience in this country. You know, the Combahee River Collective in 1977 says, as black women are free, that all people will necessarily be free because we sit at the center of all oppression. Right. And that is profoundly true. Yes. So yes, if we ever were to actually trust black women instead of maligning black women the way that we are, marginalizing black women, and we can just look at what happened with Gayle King recently to know that black men participate in that as well. But if we were to actually follow those who have been the most on the bottom, those are the people who have the most empathy for our country. And yes, we could see a country that was a different country if we actually followed the lead of black women. That's my last word on that.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Let's please thank our guests, Nikole Hannah-Jones and Kiese Laymon.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.